How's everybody? Okay, guys. We've got quite a lot of stuff to do today, so we will power through. We are going to do a separate thing for next week, specifically on your second assignment. We'll spend some time next week talking about your second assignment. But all of the stuff that we're going to do today is feeding into what is being asked of you in your second assignment. So we're going to be talking about a lot of different things which you'll need to use within your second assignment and the submission for that. So we'll talk about the specifics of that next week. So today we are thinking about financial information and communication accountability, specifically three forms of financial documentation. So we've got cash flow statements, as we know done previously. We've got balance sheets and we've got profit and loss accounts. Okay. Lots of quizzes throughout this, but there's going to be quite a lot of information as well. So try and lighten it up when we can. Any questions before we get going? Everyone happy with that? Grand. Okay, so hopefully by the end of today's session, you'll be able to distinguish the differences between balance sheets, profit and loss statements, and cash flow statements. You're going to be able to compile financial statements of your own. So you're going to be doing some of these yourself, and you'll be able to look at a financial statement and be able to understand how well the organization is performing financially by reading it. Okay. So we probably looked at this when we looked at, is this a touchscreen? It is, isn't it? So we looked at this diagram when we looked at the idea of budgeting. So budgeting being a forward-looking exercise that we do when we're trying to plan for the future. So your cash flows that you were doing for Sterling on the ball, for example, that was looking ahead for the season. Now we're going to be thinking about how did the organization perform historically. So looking about what has it done over the past 12 months, for example. Okay. So we're thinking about where are we now and how did we get here as opposed to what are we going to do in the future. Two main uses for financial statements for financial accounting data that managers are likely to encounter. So the first one will be able to hopefully explain how an organization is performing financially. Okay, so you can use a balance sheet to have a look and say how the organization has performed from a financial standpoint. So, for example, if you were the chief executive of a sports governing body, let's say Rowing Scotland, you would be able to present your accounts and be able to outline how the organization has performed, whether it made money, whether it lost money, did it meet its targets. Okay. The second one might be useful. They're going to be publicly available documents. Okay, so they might be useful if you were interested in doing business with that organization. You might use the financial statements to make a judgment on whether there's somebody you would be willing to do business with. Okay, so if you were talking about supplying the pies to the local football club, you might want to know that the football club are going to be in a position to be able to pay their bills on time. Okay, so knowing what is in the financial documentation, are they going to be in a financially sustainable position, and are they going to be able to afford to pay your invoices on time? Because what you don't want to be in a position is having supplied the pies for a season and not to have any cash coming through your books. Okay, so trying to get an understanding of how organizations are performing from the outside as well. So skill in analyzing financial statements, particularly important because if it's done well, it's going to allow you to make informed diagnosis of an organization's financial health. So the kind of questions that you're likely to be asking are, has the organization got enough money to pay its bills? Does it have enough money to invest in new buildings or equipment? And would you be prepared to trade with it? Okay, so by looking at a financial documentation from a club, these are hopefully the types of things that you would want to be able to answer. Does it work both sides? It doesn't work both sides. So our glossary, we're going to go through these. You'll get a better understanding of what each of these terms mean over the course of the session, but just to give you a bit of a run through right now. So when we're talking about assets, we're talking about things that the business or the company owns in some way, and that has either a current or a future economic value. We're going to go into what some of these things mean, but they can be either a tangible asset or it could be a non-tangible asset, and that is almost exactly as it sounds. So a tangible asset being something that you can touch and feel and hold, or a non-tangible asset like a player's playing contract, for example. Okay. We've got liabilities. So this is money that we owe to other businesses, okay, or may owe to other businesses in the future. These are things like loans. So if we've taken a business loan out to build a new stadium or a facility of some sort, we might have to pay interest rates on that. So these are all liabilities. Expenses, these are expenses incurred by the business in efforts to generate revenue. So thinking here about paying for players' contracts, for example, would be an example of an expense. Revenue, we know revenue is money coming into the organization, okay? So that could be through sponsorship, ticket prices, ticket sales, etc. And then ownership, we're going to be talking here about equity. So who actually owns the business? How is that divided? How much a share is worth, for example? Is it something that has shareholders? Okay. So as you say, the three main types of financial documentation, we're going to spend most of the time today talking about balance sheets and the profit and loss account. I think we're fairly familiar now with cash flow statements, but we will just touch upon them at the end. So what we're trying to get to with the financial documentation is a place where we can tell a story about an organization, a financial story, being able to understand what has happened within the organization, usually over the past 12 months, and what has actually gone on within the business, okay? We are also going to be able to tell what money has come into the business, what money's gone out of the business. Are there any red flags here that we should be concerned about? Are we spending too much money in one area and not generating enough in another? So let's start. We'll start with our balance sheet. Okay, so a balance sheet is exactly as it sounds. It is an overview of an organization in which everything needs to balance up. Okay, so when we're saying everything, we're talking about both assets, liabilities, and equity. So I don't know how well you can see this diagram, but what we have on the bit in red is our total assets as a business. Okay, so if a sports club's total assets, it's likely, what kind of things would a sports club likely have as an asset? Do we think? What assets is a sports club likely to have, big or small? Equipment, yep.
Players.
Player contracts, yep. Stadium, good. Facilities, yep. Okay, so they're going to be the main ones. These are things that we own in some way, okay, and that we can document as having said we've bought it. So, for example, we've bought laptops for the IT department or the scouting department, for example, okay. They are then going to appear in our balance sheet as an asset. But as we say, everything that comes into the business as an asset needs to balance in some way, okay? So on the other hand of the assets, we also have our liabilities. So that is money that we owe to other businesses or other individuals. And we also have equity as well, okay? So our balance sheet measures what a club owns in assets and what it owes to other parties, liabilities, and our equity. So who actually owns the business, okay? So a balance sheet shows the relationship between these three financial elements and is expressed by the equation assets equals equity plus liabilities. So at all times, the balance sheet does what it says on the tin, balance, okay? Our assets need to balance with both our liabilities and our equity. So equity in this sense is going to be share capital. So who owns the shares in the business, okay? And our liabilities are current and non-current liabilities. And we'll come on to what each of those means in a second. Any questions about that so far? Probably important to highlight this bottom point actually. So it doesn't necessarily mean that a club is either profitable or non-profitable, because all it's showing is that we have a total number of assets which are balanced. Okay, so it's not going to show us how profitable the organization is. That's perhaps where our profit and loss statement comes in. So let's start with our assets. What is classified as an asset for an organization? So we have three definitions that something needs to meet for it to be deemed an asset for our organization. Okay, so it needs to be controlled by the club, and that means that the club has to have almost the risks and rewards of ownership of it. Okay, it needs to generate economic benefits for the club. These can be either in the form of generating income or cost savings in some way. Okay, and thirdly, an asset is due to a past event. So it's usually a contract which we signed on a particular date, Or it could be we've got an invoice for it which said we bought this laptop last week on this date and we have the invoice for it in some form. Okay, so there's a past event that's happened, we paid for it, and we have a piece of paper that perhaps documents the fact that we paid for it. Okay. So it needs to be for an agreed price, and that's why the kind of written down part is important. So, 3 questions here for you based on those 3 criteria that we've just said. So it's due to a past event, it's owned by the club, and it generates some value for us as an organisation. These 3 statements. So software should be considered an asset within the balance sheet. True or false? What do we think? True or false? Software. Or it could be any piece of software really that is important for us to run. Like maybe it's a marketing CRM system, so we have a track of who our supporters are and who's bought a season ticket. Okay, true. Why do we think true?
Because we have to invest on the CRM system like on an annual basis. So, and at the end of the day, that is helping us to find out what is the profit and loss.
Okay, so it has a value. Yeah. Do we own it?
We do not own the CRM system itself, but then we are paying a subscription for it.
Okay, we've got a license to use it. Yep. Okay, and is it due to a past event? Like, have we paid for it already?
Yeah, we have paid to build the software.
Okay. So we're calling our software an asset. What about the fan base of a club? Can we consider the fan base of let's say, a baseball club to be an asset within the balance sheet? Would the Yankees in their balance sheet have their fan base listed?
I would say.
You would say so?
Yeah.
Why?
Because they provide some sort of financial elements to the organisation, so therefore they are an asset.
Okay.
So you'd obviously put in your projected ticket income or games or something like that.
Okay. So there's a financial value to the size of the fan base. Okay. Okay. So with one view here. Any other views? Should a fan base considered an asset? Does it meet all 3 of our criteria? What does it not meet? Do we own a fan base? No. Did we pay for it previously? So, unfortunately, we can't consider our fan base to be an asset. And our third one, the brand value of a club. So let's take a basketball club. Let's take the Clippers. Can we consider the brand value of the Clippers, the LA Clippers, to be an asset? What about our criteria? Have we paid for a brand value in the past? Not sure. What about, is it due to payment in, do we own it? It's a tricky one, but probably not. Okay, we don't really own, we have control over a brand, but you don't own a brand, right? It's something you can create, but you don't own it, right? So we don't have, we haven't paid for it. We don't have any documentation to say we paid 100 million for a brand. It's not something. Well, it does provide value to us because we have brand equity, but it's probably not a brand. Okay, sorry, an asset. Okay, so our types of assets, we've established what can be considered an asset and what can't be considered an asset, and we can break these down further into both non-current and current assets. Okay, so our non-current assets, they're sometimes known as a fixed asset. Okay, but they're ones that are going to be used by the club for at least 1 year. So it's something that we're not expecting to have a short-term life. We're buying it on the basis that it's going to have long-term value to us as an organisation. So a fixed asset, what would be an example of a fixed asset, do you think? Stadium would be probably the best example. Yep, we're not planning to build a stadium and use it for 1 year and knock it down, right? We're hoping to be there for 50 to 100 years perhaps. So a fixed asset is something that... you going to say something? No, you're just scratching your head. So a long-term tangible piece of property or equipment, okay? And then we've got our current assets, okay? Current assets are things that we are expecting to convert to cash within a year. What would a sports club buy, do you think, that would be considered a current asset? Equipment, maybe players. Usually players get signed for perhaps 3 to 5 years, so they perhaps wouldn't be considered a current asset. What might be a current asset? Sorry? Apparel? Yeah, go on. What do you mean by that? Okay, so you're thinking for the players? So merchandise probably would be a non-current asset, sorry, a current asset, okay? So we're going to buy merchandise for this year's kit, and we're hoping to put it in the shop, and we're hoping fans are going to buy that, and we're going to be able to convert that to cash, hopefully before the end of the season, right? Another one would be if we were selling teas and coffees in the stadium. Okay, we're hoping that people are going to come. We're hoping people are going to come and buy those goods. And so it's either, sorry. The building would probably be considered a fixed asset, but probably not the players. Okay. Transportation vehicles would be fixed assets. Yeah. Okay, so it's either cash that we have in the bank or things that we expect to be converted into cash within a year. Okay, so that is what we would consider to be a current asset within our balance sheet. So our current assets, we can break these down. We've mentioned inventory, so we've got merchandise and perhaps catering stock. We've got our trade and other receivables. So, for example, we have rented our stadium out for a charity match. They've paid us, or they're going to pay us £1,000 for the rent. Okay, we've got that. They owe us £1,000. We haven't converted it to cash yet because they haven't paid us, but we consider that to be a current asset. Okay. And then any cash that we have. So anything that we have currently in our bank account would be considered a current asset. So we're going to do a quick quiz here. Think about each of those examples. What would the following be treated as? Would they be treated as trade, cash, or inventory? Oh, Charlie, you lost distance in the leadership board yesterday. Just like you're still front.
So we can join. We can join. Yeah.
You can't join?
Yeah.
Ah. Sure. Working now? Yeah.
See if you go
Oh, I
look
think
at the
that's on
bottom.
the slides.
Look at the bottom of that. See on your phone track.
Okay, right, that will do. You can join as we go. So, which of those types does the following fit into? So, money owed to the club, normally from an outstanding transfer payment or sponsorship fee, due to be paid within 1 year. How would that be treated by the club? So it's our trade or other receivables. Okay, so it's not, we can't treat it as cash at the moment because we haven't received the cash yet. Okay, so it's going to be trade or other receivables, but we're expecting to receive it within the next year. Question number 2, money in the bank. What would we treat money in the bank as? Okay, yep, so cash in the bank, we're going to treat as cash or cash equivalents. And then our last one, the club's catering stock, what would we treat this as? Yep, we're going to treat this as inventory. This is something that we're going to hope to convert to cash within the next year, okay? But we haven't got it just yet. Okay, and so the winner was... Oh. Charlie. He's back. He's back. Okay, well done, Charlie.
That's the one I've done with
Okay, so that's current assets. Non-current assets is an asset that we're not expecting to convert to cash. Okay, so we've said what would be considered to be a fixed asset is also known as, so it could be a stadium perhaps. It's one that's going to benefit the organization for more than 1 year. So it could be stadium, facilities, it could be cars and vehicles, it could be any equipment used by the ground staff, and most likely going to be player registrations if the player has a contract for more than 1 year. Okay. So on the right here, we can see an example of Barcelona's balance sheet and how they've split their non-current assets with their their non-current assets and how they've split them down. And they've split them into 2 types. Okay, so they've split theirs into sporting assets and non-sporting assets. Okay, so sporting assets are going to be their player contracts, and their non-sporting assets are going to be things like other background administration, essentially. Okay, so you can see how the sporting assets are going to be significantly higher. For the non-sporting, we've got things like property, plant and equipment, investment property, okay, deferred tax assets, for example. Okay, so now thinking about is it going to be a current asset or a non-current asset? The code might be different again.
I'm Bill.
like Agent X.
Okay, everyone ready? Yeah. You can't get in? If you go to menti.com and use the code at the top.
I hope we win.
Oh, sorry, no, the one on the screen.
Yeah.
Okay. So are these going to be considered current or non-current assets? Okay. The money to be received from a company that rented the stadium for a corporate event, current or non-current? It's a current asset. Why is it a current asset? Hopefully, before the end of the year, we're going to receive the money for renting out the facility. Okay. The player registration rights related to the recently contracted goalkeeper of the team. Is that going to be a current asset or a non-current asset? Yeah, good. We're hoping that the goalkeeper is going to be with us for more than a year. We're not going to sell them within a year. Okay. The money in the club's current bank account, current asset or non-current asset? Yes, current asset. We could cash this out if we wanted to at any point. The club's catering stock, current or non-current? Why is it current? Why would it be a current asset?
Because it could change inventory. Make it more players, make it more style.
No.
But, all right, cheers.
No.
Okay, I got to answer that.
So it's a current asset because we bought catering stocks. We know that fans are coming to the game at the weekend. They're going to buy the catering stocks. It's going to be cash. Okay, they're going to convert that into cash. Okay.
I'm staying put because most people.
Question 5. The laptops of the scouting department, are they current assets or non-current assets? It's a non-current asset because we're not planning on selling it within the next year, hopefully. Okay, we're buying it for a longer term value. Okay.
I was right.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is.
Okay. So we have an idea now of what a current asset is, what a non-current asset is, different types of current assets. Okay. Now we're going to think about what is a tangible or a non-tangible asset. Okay, so a further division of assets, splitting them between tangible and intangible. Okay, so tangible assets, also sometimes called property, plant, and equipment on the balance sheet. This is simply things that have a physical substance to them. So as I say, if you've bought phones for everyone, that's going to be a tangible asset. Okay, it's probably going to be a non-current tangible asset, but it's a tangible asset. Okay, because we aren't going to plan to convert it to cash within the next year, and we can physically touch it. Okay, so both of those two things. So, for example, office computers, vehicles, equipment, similar items, they're usually grouped together under this title of property, plants, and equipment. Okay. Intangible assets has no physical substance, but the club has a legal right to allow to transfer that intangible asset to another club or business. So that could include patent rights, trademarks, goodwill, and licenses. But the one that's probably going to be most relevant to us is going to be player registration licenses. Okay, so once they've signed that license, we don't physically own that player, right? Because that's not a thing that happens. But we have the license for that player's registration. Okay, so we can trade that, and that would be an intangible asset. Okay. Any questions about that? Everyone happy with that? Yeah. Okay, so let's try again. We're going to have a look at tangible or intangible assets.
I'm 40 a bit pace.
Okay. Players' registrations rights would be considered as what? Are they going to be considered neither tangible or intangible, tangible or tangible? Intangible, sorry. Okay, players' registration rights. Oh, I would have that down as an intangible. Yeah, my bad. Just write that one off. Just ignore it.
What was the answer to that?
Which get on right?
What was the actual answer?
It was an intangible, but I put tangible, so my bad. The office PC of the office manager would be considered as tangible, neither tangible or intangible, Yes, that's going to be a tangible asset. The club stadium, are we going to consider this tangible or intangible? That's tangible assets, yes. The personal Ferrari of your star player. Tangible, intangible, or neither. Okay, why would it be neither? Not the clubs, we actually don't own it. Okay, good. I usually see how many weeks it is before people start changing their name to funny names. Come on, man. You can change it. Yeah. Okay, well done. Okay, so we've had a look at the assets. Okay, so we've had a look at our current assets, our non-current assets, and various divisions of that. We're now having a think about liabilities. So this is money that is going to be due to third parties in some way. So the conditions for this kind of similar to our assets, but it needs to be related to an obligation or commitment. So if we've written down somewhere that we're actually going to undertake this purchase, and we're going to have to pay somebody some money at some point. It's going to be settled by outflow of economic benefits. That is a fancy way of saying we're going to give someone some cash, and it needs to be due to a past event. Okay, so again, player sales. If we bought a player, we might have to pay that club, £10 million at some point down the road. We're perhaps not going to give them that to them straight up, but the other club will be expecting that at some point in the near future. Okay. So liabilities, an example, we've got Ronaldo who transferred from Real Madrid to Juventus in 2018 for €112, which was payable in installments. So this meets our definition of a liability because we've got a contractual obligation. We've got an agreement that we are going to pay Real Madrid for that fee. The liability is only to be settled once we've paid them the full amount, and that it was due to a past event, which was the transfer itself. Okay. And we can break our liabilities down into non-current and current liabilities, much like our assets. Okay, so non-current liabilities, payments not due within 12 months. These are generally going to be things like bank loans. Okay, also liabilities to other clubs related to play sales, installments over more than 12 months. Okay, and then our current liabilities, these are going to be things that we are going to have to pay out within the next 12 months. So this is generally going to be suppliers for received services. Maybe it's our Pi supplier or a program supplier. Includes bonuses due to players if they've hit certain contractual obligations, perhaps around goal bonuses or something similar, and also liabilities to other clubs related to player sales. So as we say, a balance sheet always has to balance. So you're probably thinking, well, how does that work? If we've paid £10 million for a player, how does that actually equate to the balance sheet? I've used the example of West Ham because although they're not playing very well at the moment, they are still the greatest club in the world. So if we go with West Ham and they want to sign, I heard that. If we sign a player from Chelsea, okay, for an agreed fee of £20 million, the West Ham have only got £5 million cash in the bank, okay? So we're going to borrow 15 million to make up the 20, okay? Thus, our intangible sporting assets increased by 20 because we've now signed that player for a fee of £20 million. Doesn't actually matter if they're worth £20 million or not, but we've signed them for £20 million, and that's what the obligation says, right? So that goes into our assets for 20 million. But our assets at the same time decreased by 5 million because we've paid out £5 million in cash, so we've lost £5 million. And furthermore, our liabilities have increased by £15 million. Okay, so if you think that our assets have to always equal liability and equity, okay. Does that make sense? How they always need to, it always needs to come from somewhere to balance up. Yeah. So we've got 20 million in assets, but we've also lost 20 million in assets. So when we record this transaction in the balance sheet, we need to think about the fact that the asset has gone up. So in this case, it's gone up by £20 million. Another asset might have gone down, or liability might have increased, or equity might have increased. Okay. If the asset has gone down, another asset must have gone up somewhere, or liability has gone down, or equity has gone down. Okay. So the important thing to just remember is always needs to balance out at the end of the day. So we think about a club buying a player for £2 million. The company could buy the player for cash, and if so, increase player registration assets by £2 million and decrease cash assets by £2 million. Alternatively, if the club bought the player and agreed to pay for him at a later date, the club would increase player registrations by £2 million and increase trade liabilities by £2 million. Does that make sense? So we're taking £2 million into our assets, we're paying out £2 million in liabilities. Or the final option would be to issue shares to the owner to fund the purchase. So the owner's going to buy the player themselves, but they're going to want shares in return for it. So that's equity coming into play there. So we've got to increase our share capital of equity by 3 million pounds. Okay. Any questions about that? One happy with that as a concept? Yeah. What do you think would be some of the issues with a balance sheet based on what we've just been through? What would one of the dangers be of looking at a balance sheet and seeing how much we have in assets and being able to determine whether that's representative of real life or not? Any issues that you could envisage? Okay, so we might sign a player for £100 million. Okay, they might not actually be £100 million of good, but no one might want to buy them off us for £100 million. So we bought them for £100 million, but we're not going to necessarily be able to sell them for £100 million. So our assets are perhaps slightly deceiving in that sense. They might run down their contract, so we've lost them completely at some point. Okay, we might not get anything back for them. So it's just important to bear in mind how assets can appear and how much you can actually determine from them sometimes. So let's have a look at an example. This is perhaps more of a community club than a big elite sporting organisation. Oh, who's not going to win the quiz this week? Example of the balance sheet. So what can you tell about the organisation from this balance sheet? Is there anything to you that would stick out that you would want to highlight? Does it all balance out?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. Anything that we should be concerned about, do you think? Anything that you would be drawn to at this point? How much do we have in assets? 20 million, yeah? Or sorry, 20,000, okay? How much do we have in current assets? So of the 29,000 we have, only 9,000 of that is in current assets. What are our current liabilities? 14. So our current liabilities outweigh our current assets, right? So if they were to want to get that paid within the next week, we would have a 5,000 shortfall that we wouldn't be able to make up, right? So these are the kind of things that you would want to be looking for when you're kind of looking at the balance sheet. Is what are your current assets and what are your current liabilities, okay? So as we say, the organisation's current assets of 9,000 and current liabilities of 14,000. So the difference between current assets and current liabilities is something we might call working capital. Okay, so how much free cash have we got to play with? If the working capital is negative, that is we have more liabilities than we have assets, then we would be pretty concerned at this point as an organisation. So we've got bills of $14,000 to pay, but only $5,000 in the bank. Therefore, we've got an issue of something called liquidity. We haven't got enough cash to play with, basically. Okay, and the problem, if the problem is only temporary, which means perhaps we're going to get in some new money, we're waiting on some money to come in from another source. Probably not going to be the end of the world. We can probably delay paying its bills. But if the situation continues and we can't continue to pay bills when they're due, then we're going to have financial difficulty and we might even become bankrupt eventually. Okay. So weaknesses of a balance sheet is just a photograph of an organization on one particular day of the year, right? So it's not going to tell us a moving picture of how things are happening within the organization, but it's a snapshot of an organization on one particular day. So it's not going to tell us the whole picture. It's what we're just seeing as essentially what the club owns, okay? and we want to know more about how we ended up with a difference, is going to be in the retained earnings section of the report. Okay. Therefore, we're going to need an income statement or a profit and loss statement, essentially, which is going to allow us to have a better look at the financial performance of the organization. Right, we are going to have another quiz. Think about how we might split up a range of different sources of funding and how we would categorize them. Okay, question 1. How are we going to treat each of these purchases? There's 2 possible options here. Are we going to treat purchases as assets, liability, expense, revenue, or ownership? Okay, it could become an asset potentially, but it's also going to be an expense to the organization. Okay, we're paying money out for it. Postage costs. What are we going to treat this as? We're going to treat it as an asset, a liability, expense, revenue, or ownership. Yes, it's an expense. Yep, we're paying it. It's not going to become an asset unless you want to count the stamp as an asset. Which could be if it was a pricely stamp. Travel and accommodation. What is this going to be accounted as? Is this going to be an asset, liability, expense, revenue, or ownership? Stock inventory. Okay, so tea, coffee, etc. Asset, liability, expense, revenue, or ownership. Yes, it's an asset. We can convert it to cash. Rent received. We've rented out some of our premises. We've had some cash. How are we treating it? Okay, good. This is revenue for the organization. Yep. We check in on the scores. Baba. A bank loan. Okay, are we going to treat a bank loan as an asset, a liability, expense, revenue, or ownership? Okay, got a liability. We're going to have to pay this back at some point. Unless you get a student loan, then you can just never pay it back. Sales. What are we going to treat this as? Sales is revenue, money coming into the organization. Goods. Salaries. How are we treating salaries? It's an expense. Yep, good. Share capital. How are we going to treat share capital? Ownership. Okay. Share capital is who owns the business, how is it split up? Yeah. Goodwill.
I was taking too long to actually read them. Yeah, it was the same answer as my
Income from investments. How are we treating income from investments? Are you just literally tapping anything? Yeah, revenue. Who is Papa? No pressure. No pressure. Final question. Provision for taxation. Yes, liability. Yeah. Okay, well done, Baba. Okay, we'll do a couple more slides and then I'll give you a chance for a break. So we've done our balance sheet. Okay, now we're thinking about our profit and loss account. So we know the issues we have with our balance sheet. That doesn't really tell us how profitable we are as an organisation. But our profit and loss account is where we're going to get a bit more detail around this. Okay, so sometimes called an income statement or statement of profit or losses. Okay, it's going to summarise the trading transaction of the business over a period of time. Most organisations produce a profit or loss account covering a 12-month period. Sometimes it could be slightly shorter or longer, depending if you've altered your kind of financial year end at any point. Okay. Three main elements that we need to think about within our profit and loss account. That's our income, our costs, and our profit, hopefully. So we've got our turnover, which we're going to think about as X. Okay, so for our turnover for our organisation, it's going to be things like our membership income, gate receipts, television income, sponsorship, catering, merchandise, etc. Okay, our main sources of revenue for the organisation. Our expenditure is going to be things like salaries, utilities, depreciation of fixed assets. So that's when our assets, we have to attribute a cost to them over time before they're going to be derelict, essentially. Okay. And then what we're going to be able to do is work out whether we have a profit or surplus, depending on this, which is done obviously in your cash flow statements. So an example here, going back to our Black Stump Football Club. Okay, we've got income of $3,210, and we've got expenses of $5,040, which leaves us with a loss for the year of $1,830. Okay. Oops. So what I'm going to do is give you some time to work through income statements and balance sheet worksheet on Canvas. obviously, if you want to get a break and use the bathroom or grab a coffee, do so. We'll be working on this for a wee bit of time, so take some time to work through it and have a comfort break. Okay. I will be circling. I'm going to ask Kate about the elections.
Oh, God.
Yeah. What's going to happen?
No. No, right now I think it's actually going blue. I think a lot of it is. I'm looking at it, and it is blue. Well, it's because
Yeah.
it's such a big dispute, and if Trump goes in, it's like it's going full road against it because like this local just like died. One died they said she was gonna no, I don't. Yeah. A lot of them are like, this is stupid. A lot of them of the Roe versus Wade. So I think a lot of people are right now.
Yeah, I saw.
Probably. Or brain cells. At least in America. Yeah. So right now a lot I feel like it's going that way because I see the hockey. Because they think like a partner was big dog, you're not. Why? That's one reason why movie because I'm going to talk about like I changed my tone. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like
It wasn't a hard study, you know, it was fictitious, but it was like
yeah, I can see it too because it's like it's not like it's all Republicans. It's like there's like the idiot ones and then there's like the Reagan ones. So like those ones are like smart, but they like try to say that if they don't love Reagan, we're not going to pass something to that. So it's like the idiot ones are kind of like making like all the noise and like I forgot who it was. The Reagan program, but Harry was going on that's like too strong women.
Yeah.
And they're going to be represented. Yeah. So one thing I have to be doing right is he's having
Right.
on the user. He's having a stupid life.
Yeah.
It's not at all. She's like in so I'm just like I just can not
前阵子触手没撕的时候，快点把你的，我把你的锅给
yeah, I'm like I thought about that. Yeah.
But it sounds super close, right?
It's hard to say. Like right now, it's kind of taking lead. I don't know what states kind of like a lot are kind of going blue.
I saw this guy that got like the last.
I said like the huge thing right now is the Roe versus Wade. Or just based off the Roe versus Wade. So stuff like Texas is always red. But people are because with the new generation, it's getting closer to becoming a blue. So it's just like kind of cool. But my state's always been blue, which is kind of funny because yeah, which is kind of funny because that's mainly because of the Western. It's their own state. So I kind of say because there are it's like more than on my side of the state than blue. But like when looking at the state insurance blue, it's like your favorite.
你让我说，你不好意思说这种话，我为什么不好意思？
I don't really like the.
我说我要是你，
But I think it sounds blue.
听懂？
But yeah.
哦，你不来上课，
We will know this time tomorrow.
Oh yeah, it's at
Yeah,
last.
what else
I
did you
think there's something online I can
你无所谓。
actually.
我听课听不听课那是我自己的事情，知道吗？我来不来那个是我。
你像这样就长线，爱特一下。
听不懂就不能做水。
对呀，这太
是的，
当你吃饭的时候吃的。
Good crisps. Tasty.
Yeah.
What flavour?
Spring onion.
Nice.
So I guess is what it's kind of looking like, and then even the ones that have
Yeah.
so if it's like a solid color, that means that stays up. But if it's like a light blue or a red, it's kind of going that way. But
What are, and those sweet ones, aren't
yeah, so a lot of the swing ones are like I think on the east, and then there's like Nevada, I think Arizona. But so far it's kind of going blue on top. And 270 the wind, but like even though it says light blue on here, it's not, I mean light blue, it's not. It's just gonna go, but they don't have it for sure. But a lot of it comes down to like Wisconsin, like Pennsylvania, like a lot of these eastern states that usually are like the deciding battleground states that are usually deciding.
It's going to be interesting.
I think it's going to go blue. I'm strongly thinking it is. Yeah.
这是我很难的认同。
I've said week 6 on there, but obviously that should say week 7, just so you know.
I remember this last I went to
Colour
straight up to my
coordinating, you've got to get that.
yeah. My mom did our hands.
Oh wait, this
tree.
is funny.
Really? I have descendants from.
So you're not.
Green one.
Like red.
Exactly. You're our two
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately.
It's easy to find the white meat.
Okay.
Yeah. I just have to remember the color of that.
Yeah, yeah.
That's easy.
Okay.
Do you want some?
Crisp, yeah.
Well, I gotta make sure I go to my mom's tree.
Good.
Very cheesy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very full flavour. Yeah, I will. Thank you.
She want to apologize to you about the translation.
About the translation? What translation?
Scottish side on mom.
Oh.
They told.
You don't need to apologise. I understand you're competitive.
Keep going out there. This is not okay.
Even
How's everything going? What's on your top?
So that's the
Milo.
down.
Basketball.
Anthony.
Basketball. Yeah. Melo.
Nice.
I got to
这个也是，这都是
Exactly. So what kind of talk shit you fucking American? It's not problems. What if we did the difference? I am related to. Come on, let me click it.
我是一直在点啊，点一个点赞号，那个一点。
William. You know what?
Okay,
I am not related to royalty. But I'm pretty sure if it's correct, that was his. She is their bastard. Is his bastard child. So he took the bastard child. She married to Curtis Galloway. All the way to
我一喝酒上周工资。
1068. How high did she get? I think. That's actually quite impressive that she stepped up. Mm-hmm. So all the way to 493. Well, we mainly went up the line. She went that one minute, so it's mainly like the each side. Because that's why we got the fucking stupid American started. It's just like royalty.
将军家被你疼了。
他自己他妈就自己。
Dude, I make fun of Americans all the time.
You're part of the problem then, is what I'm hearing.
Exactly. I am part of the
No,
problem.
are you the
Right. You're also contributing to this.
I don't
from
feel
there.
that.
Just because I'm from there doesn't mean I have to like take ownership of it. I don't want. Why don't do it only American class? I know it's a bit.
Yeah, it's great.
But I know.
哪一个在出版？
Like I'm independent. Yeah. Like I just do whatever I like.
这么屌丝的黑手，我也跟中国多少如果很屌，
Which I'm like perfectly fine with, 'cause I'm like,
No, that's crazy.
so like, just because, yeah, she's not him. Straight up. It's so bad. But like I said, it's not even overcomplicated. It's like people go through it. Like,
大家一
it's like weird. It's so true. Just 'cause it's different races. Like always. They're not like the way. What kind of men? But yeah, so those are the stuff like that one girl. Something like that. It's the whole world is just wasted. That's so fucking especially when you go to the I mailed my ballot. I mailed my ballot. I printed it and I mailed it. You can mail it. I just
Who's moving?
what?
India.
Oh, I have no idea. I don't know the politics, to be honest. I really don't. We're uneducated. Do you see how stupid Americans are? Like,
Don't they have to?
it's like, I'll be completely honest, it's like almost, well, it's almost yeah, because it's like I get two different sides of the numbers, but it's like
So that's where you went in the middle.
yeah, I just was doing it. Some people literally vote just because of their party. So like they're definitely like they're going to so if you're no, he's not. He's a business.
Very good businessman as well, but I think he's a good politician as well. Shooting stuff. Don't you think that was made art?
What?
The shooting thing that happened.
At the White House?
No, no,
Yeah,
no.
still.
Encouraged on people to run the attack the White House. He was encouraged, so that's one already. That's another red flag. Veto and like
Sometimes
anything
when
international.
these kind of stuff.
He's also
Maybe the age of the matter.
no, age definitely matters. He's not, and with the whole Roe versus Wade. At least I haven't done it. No.
Does she look like I'm sorry. That was
Someone look like that.
no, but she's writing notes from like
No.
That's some talent as well, but sometimes like you're just doing notes from coding stuff.
At the end of the season, minus.
Man, what a difference, man.
she'll argue about anything.
Sorry for the overestimation.
Sorry. I don't know how psyched I think I was. Sorry.
Technically, it's only 2 notes behind. It doesn't mean we're on.
What do you do regularly?
I love to remember. What? Yeah.
My coaches can have
Yeah.
我有这样想法。
Which I think is stupid still. Currently. I miss bowling. I miss it so much.
Right over there, it's supposed to like goal is not even a part of it.
No, it's like
It's
so important. Like I played goalie is probably one of my favorite positions.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, I was more needed on the field than I was at home a lot of
How's
times.
everyone getting on? Okay.
around when you were the age of 15. Around 10 years.
Yeah. I was on the field more so I just started playing. Do you think just
So you're physically fit. That's why
well, this is also before my ACL injury. So
you had an ACL.
I had an ACL
High
like
five. I had an ACL.
oh yeah, ACL literally the worst.
Talks about career, like it's like
You have to
one year down the line, one year is gone.
Mhm.
1 year for motivation and all that.
Yeah.
It's just gone.
And you have to like learn like tell when to be fast because sometimes if it sends you back, it's like you have to think about a different way.
But the ACL is before you being a center back or after?
So, it was kind of like I become a center back after the ACL because before that.
You have to work more on the field being a center back.
Yeah, depending on the depending on the I mean, I thought center back was but before that was usually outside back because my ACL was outside back. But before that was forward.
Yeah, the science.
Oh, you are forward as well?
But it's
Like I played every position
All
of
over
the
the
field. Yes. Because the ACL was usually like really all the time. And my ACL downhill. So yeah,
Speed does go down. We can't even argue about that. Even if you have a very good rehab, like me, I will take it, then at the end of the day,
Yeah, that one is for this one. I think so.
What? I wasn't planning on it. Maybe.
you will get a lot of money, but if you're in a good position,
So far, I just want.
But maybe not just.
you're in a good position.
Yeah, I just want to build. I just want to be anywhere but America.
I know the captain of this women's football team. As one of the biggest clubs in India. So,
So do you know Narendra Modi?
no.
Right?
She knows almost nothing.
But you do know who's Andy Robertson?
About that.
Do you know who's Andy Robertson?
No.
You don't know who's Andy Robertson?
But I think that's good.
Wow.
He's the left back for Scotland.
I don't know football. I don't know.
Dude, don't even ask me about players. I know Messi.
That's all.
Well, I know some
Because
of the
he's
big
playing for
names.
Inter Miami right now.
No, I liked him when he was in Barcelona.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
you've seen him play at Barcelona.
Yeah.
So,
Dude, I went to
telling
he
you.
was going during the World Cup to watch him play.
Don't ask
Like
me.
it was even worth my time, and I went to watch
okay. The timing
the
is
World
Right.
Cup
If
play,
it's-
so
if
to
it's
watch Argentina play.
No, stop.
You don't know Claudia Rosa?
Oh,
I don't know.
yeah, that's lectures.
I want to say.
But yes, as our lecturers. But I don't know.
Also, I strength. You know, you can divide
I don't know who won I don't know what reason. I know what it is, but
Because you're studying sports management.
Yeah, but like,
yeah, you don't have to know the
guys, come
necessary.
on. Do you know everything about every sport ever?
ask some ethics
What's
questions.
Well, yeah.
What which one?
No, see, like, that's
I mean,
the
I
thing.
can't answer any of that.
Like, let's like talk about stuff. If I started asking you, what about figure skating?
I
Tell me
think
the
I think
latest
about
figure
I
skating.
think about wrestling. You do.
She's getting
It's not that much of wrestling.
apart from that, what about like? Okay, but I wouldn't want to. I love it. I love it. I love it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can.
Yeah, but then what's the figures? You're just getting a.
Dude, I don't watch that shit. I barely watch.
Yeah, they're very
anything. Sports.
I think sports was.
I watched gymnastics. They're the Olympics. Simone Biles is awesome. Not like passionately. I kind of know some of the things, mainly in the States.
Not on the figure skating.
Maybe.
Not figure skating.
Yeah, and I would have gone. Well, I would have been good at youth sports. I've only coached youth sports. Dude,
So you're smart enough.
I'm going wherever I can go after. Oh,
But yeah, you could have
between
said like,
3
oh,
and
this person.
I'll have to look up his
Okay, so you know.
I'd rather do like that.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, they're,
I don't know yet.
Are we actually meant to be doing that?
Get more experience.
Thanks
for I don't know where this is. I'm just saying.
So I did my dissertation.
Because usually I just like
Yeah.
language I know.
And then it was really good, and I was gonna do
Really good.
Maybe.
Yeah, it was really good. But I did it about like
I don't want to be in the US. I don't want to be in
so
the
it was a very, I think it's just very specific.
Oh yeah.
So you're very good.
Yeah.
Australia. That's why I'm not going there. We're doing it.
So I should.
Finland, a lot of
저 이거 보이니? 싫어, 너 이겼어.
I like a dog, that's about it.
Can I come to India?
Oh, coach, you be my manager.
I don't think that's gonna help. Well, yeah.
টাচ করতে পারে
Oh god. My friend got one chapter on that. Like we pink and white ones. So I was like, Spanish.
I won't consider you rude.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I thought you was
That's like 1 week after
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
We might leave around 5 to watch the fireworks. Alright, okay. Alright. And also one more thing, so football chairman thing. Yeah. I promoted the team. Okay. The profit I made was around 20. So I'm like,
It's a good game, right?
yeah, it's very good game, but yeah, again, I don't know how to.
Well, you need to develop a stadium.
I did do that. So basically, I did upgrade the stadium as well.
It's just about continuously developing and getting up the traditions. It's just it takes
Okay, so there is no short-term profit.
It's a very important part of my
Because I'm trying to like be the good chairman, have a good relationship, but most of the time I have to. Exactly. I can't be good.
No, that's a tough job. But no, well done. Good.
Yeah,
It's good
so
to
I'm
hear.
just trying to do it for the next 26 years because it's like 30 years.
Yeah.
I just try to do it for.
Yeah, there's the pro version if you get really into it.
Yeah. How's everyone getting on? All right. We can move on to the second one if you would rather. So I'll give you some time to work through the second one, which is also on Canvas. This is just trying to give you some idea of how these documents are compiled, what kind of things we need to be putting in them.
Just yeah.
You see how the flash is in his face? Like, so cool.
More rainfall.
Right. You are so deep. You are so deep.
That take one thing right to the last of it, but
There's a chance that passport.
Yes.
See on Excel,
Yes.
can you like have like a group of things, for example, say you had like 6 different could I then have all the fixtures on one Excel spreadsheet? And when I'm putting them in
Exactly.
can you show me how to do it?
Yeah. There's
Not
also
right now, but-
yeah. There's also websites you can use for that, like free ones as well. But yeah. CCM. You okay, what we're doing? Yeah.
I don't need it in the beginning.
Words for your students.
You'll know if I need it. I'm gonna play.
Yeah, when seeing it.
You were like,
I like those.
you would that you? I didn't tell you that now. I will literally just wear it on my sleeve. Like, I'm annoyed.
You know, I'm picking up the the river like separates.
Was it good?
Primary. I hate that when it's just I mean, they or not even stay like because some people have
Yeah, it depends on what school district you're in sometimes.
yeah.
Everyone okay with it?
Copy. I'm just being honest.
Well, I appreciate your honesty, but sometimes there's a place for honesty. At least tell me you did it yourself, and then I don't have to feel bad.
At least lie.
Yeah. Everybody okay with it? Yep.
And then it's like Oh, I know.
These are elite. I know we spoke about this last week, but yeah, excellent.
My dad.
You know, like
Not there.
yeah.
Young. Like coming. Oh, you Oh, you start
Yeah. Yeah. How you getting on? Okay.
बेटर हो नहीं तो सुदीप को बुला सुदीप आज কিছু লাগছে তোকে পুরো সেম লাগছে টুইনিং টুইনিং like when I speak to Top Gun.
Indian version.
Then I also did. Yeah, so they just tried. Yeah.
So how many hours do you do that?
That's where you think. You should see a little.
Oh no, I'm okay. I just have it.
To know who's
I do, but no, I actually don't.
No, I thought so.
Change your phone, change my
Copy कर रहा है क्या पता है?
Still loving sports.
Your willpower.
Look your results.
I was like, dude, I hear AC like air conditioning.
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump said
Yes,
no, it's fine. Could you believe I'm my sister.
Okay.
No, the first
What did you say?
But I'm not on.
you're towards the people.
I'm on Eastern, not Western. So the Cascades was so brush and tumbleweeds and shit like that.
During the winters, it was pretty
You act like you act like that's not a hard word. Stupid question.
I love the salary.
That's a treatment. I started on it. Pick one over and about the first two, right? And then I got distracted.
अरे मेरे को मैं पूरा तेरा जैसा दिखता है मैं उसको बोला ऐसा नहीं चलता तुम्हारे ऊपर है भाई, मेरे ऊपर नहीं
I bet your connection is
मेरा
दिवाली ब्रो यार
I've never cashed. I've been used guys. I like the else.
Okay, how are we getting on with the second one? Have anyone finished it? Almost finished it. How much would our question would be? How much is our equity ownership going to be worth? You guys okay?
So quiet.
I just slam my brakes on. Yeah. That's the kind of driver. Yeah, so.
Oh, I do that.
Nice shirt, actually. I have to say this.
When someone's like taking forever, you should learn.
I will. Do you know what? David Moyes, and I made a bet with my students at West Ham that I would wear my West Ham
I said they're coming tomorrow.
Where's the flash thing and everything? Right?
It's even more small than as well.
And the boots. Fortunately, there's no cup competitions that they could win. What was the equity? Okay, guys, we'll move on. You should have been able to work out the equity based on our equation of our assets equaling our liabilities and equity. So it should be 19,500, I think.
I added.
Okay, so we've had a look at what these statements are and how to put them together. Okay, we're now going to have a think about actually reading them. Okay, and what we can actually tell from them. Okay. So I've provided some excerpts from Tottenham Hotspur's accounts. Okay, and you have to answer the following questions based on the accounts. So, one, is the organisation meeting its objectives as a club? How has the business performed over the past year, and what are its future prospects? So, let's have a look at this. Is Tottenham Hotspur from 2009? Okay, what are the things that we would be able to tell about the business based on its income? Have a little read through and what things that stick out to you.
The way I'm looking at my new car. No offense, money. I want to be black.
we have a look at the balance statement, balance sheet, we can see in a bit more depth. Anything that would stick out to you looking at this? Perhaps any comparisons with the previous year? So the column on the right being the previous year. Anything where you would see any big differences between them?
20 grand more.
Okay, so they changed under which column?
For the total, like, it's not 20
Okay.
grand more
Yeah,
this year rather than the year before.
20. So that'll be 2 million more.
2 million more.
Yeah, because we're abbreviating this to hundreds of thousands. So yeah,
Oh, okay.
thousands at least. So we've got a change in the equity. So the equity has increased probably because our assets have increased, right? So to match up. Yeah. Okay, so we've got player tradings has gone up by £16 million. So that looks quite healthy, right? So they've sold £16 million worth of players. Okay. Would we expect every year to be able to do that, do we think? No? Okay. Okay, so we're not going to be able to bank on that each year. They've perhaps had one good year where they've sold a lot of players. Okay. Anything else that would stand out? They're probably the main things. So it's quite hard to say what's going on. There's quite a lot of numbers there, but without any kind of narrative, there's not a huge amount we can take from that. But the answers are all going to be hyperlinked. Okay, so the income statement is going to tell us that the club made a profit of £33 million before tax. If we compare that from the previous year, we'll see it's increased its pre-tax profit considerably from around 3 million to 33 million. So in terms of why the club is doing well, we've got a lot of profit on player trading. So they made £56 million in player sales in 2009, which was up from 16 million the previous year. So they've actually, the way that they've described it in the accounts, they've broken it down into profit on player trading as profit on disposable of intangible assets. Okay, so not particularly easy to detect where in the accounts that's coming up. But what we might be able to draw from that is that Spurs are pretty well run financially for the new season, and they've got players, they've got money to invest in meeting their objectives. So the income statement is going to tell us about the organisation's financial performance. The balance sheet is going to tell us how it's using its assets to conduct its business. Okay. It also details the money that the organisation owes to others, its liabilities, and we can see in its balance sheet that they have enough assets to cover their liabilities. Okay, so they had 291 million in assets versus 229 million in liabilities. So if we have a look from the previous year, we know that the liabilities have increased from 2008, and we put that into context in the football industry and what the media tells us about finance. We could say that Spurs probably aren't doing too badly, but that's only a brief look. One of the things that you're going to want to be aware of is the fact that the club obviously compile their own accounts, so they'll try and disguise things if there's things that they wouldn't want others to see within them. They might be kind of well hidden up with the accounts, and there might be quite a lot of complex terminology to perhaps confuse people from being able to see what is in them. Okay, so we've got a cash flow statement. As we know, you've done some cash flow statements already. A bit like a bank account, we're seeing how the money is coming into the organisation and how it's flowing out of the organisation. The statement's really summarising this over the period of time, usually a year, which is covered in the profit or loss account, and it explains how the cash has changed from one balance sheet to the next. Highlights the sources from which the club generates cash and the choices management make when spending it. Okay, we will finish with a quiz. Yes.
Is that important?
Yeah.
So 2009, that would have been for Berbatov.
Yeah, around that time, yeah, Bale Berbatov era, yeah, Modric. Yeah.
I think Modric was that not a bit later? I think that was 2000. Because Man United signed him at Berbatov in 2009. It might have been actually. Yeah, it was 2009. Because it was
It was good. It was a good Spurs team.
Yeah. I think Bale and Modric was 2011. I remember Man United still had a year with Ronaldo and Berbatov.
He went from Spurs to United.
I think they sold Robbie Keane to Liverpool as well that year.
Pavlyuchenko or something, didn't he?
Yeah, Roman Pavlyuchenko.
Yeah.
He was good. He was.
That's Sergei Rebrov.
Okay, just a nostalgic version.
Right, 11 questions on what you've covered over the course of the session. Everyone ready? Head in the game. Okay, question 1. Which type of financial document shows information on revenues, costs, and profit? Our income. Which type of financial document measures what a club owes and owns?
Where the coaches
It's our balance sheet. Yep. Question 3. Which type of financial document shows the money moving in and out of a club? Cash flow statement.
Yeah, everything's just so bright.
It's based upon our definition of an asset, which of the following can be classified as an asset. Why do accountants refer to transactions in a balance sheet as a double entry? Yeah, each transaction involves 2 accounts. Why is that for our balance sheet? Why do we always need to do 2 entries with a balance sheet? So if an asset goes up, something else has to go up as well. Okay. What is the primary purpose of a balance sheet? Yeah, to provide a snapshot. Which of the following best completes the statement? A balance sheet shows the relationship between 3 financial elements, including expressed as what? Yeah. Assets equals liabilities and equity.
But I remember
Which of the following could be considered a non-current asset?
Concession stand. No. Yeah, credit is fixed.
Why player contracts? Yeah, good. Which statement best describes the relationship between the balance sheet and the profit and loss statement?
You read both sides. I'm not sure.
Okay, sure. Let's go now. I don't know what the yes
Which of the following defines non-current liabilities?
right now.
Okay, this is obligations expected to be settled in more than 1 year. And then our last question. Last question. What does a cash flow statement primarily represent? Yeah, good. Okay, congratulations to the winner, who is Cole.
No, I'm not. Not anymore. Oh, I couldn't find it.
Okay, final thing before I let you go. One thing, what I'd like you to do is head to www.offthepitch.com, and we're just going to get you set up with your account so you can have us start playing around with this before our session next week. So once you go to the website, you're going to be able to log in with your University of Stirling email address. So if you go to login and then click student access, pop in your Stirling University email address.
Wait, oh, with the create account? I've copied that link. Yeah.
All right.
Is that easy
Yeah,
to do?
yeah.
Thank you.
All right, see you later. Okay, and once you have set up your account,
Battle. You're yeah.
Okay, once you're in, has everyone had any issues? You should all be able to use your Sterling address. Once you've set up an account, if you go to My Account and you go to Comparison Tool. So what Off the Pitch is a company that compile football clubs' data, okay, or their financial accounts. And you're going to be using this for your assignment, okay? So this is just to get you set up, okay? What you can do is you can change the clubs. If you want to have a little play around before next week, that's absolutely fine. You can swap the clubs in and out. So you can take out Tottenham and you can put a proper club in, like West Ham. You can take Man City out. You can put in or Real. You want Real? Real Madrid. Celtic. Stop saying that, please. Someone.
They don't have American. They don't have American. I know none of these clubs.
I don't think they've got Indian clubs.
They don't have American clubs. Like, what the heck?
Why don't we have a look at? Once you've done that, click Show Data, and you can compare your clubs based on the data, okay? Everybody have any issues logging in? No? All okay? So you can compare data of those clubs, and then what you can do is you can change the parameters, okay? So we're currently looking at turnover, so that's all the money that's coming into each of these clubs. We can see that of these, Burnley have got the smallest turnover, okay? Then Sporting, and then Celtic, then West Ham, then Man City, then Real Madrid, yeah? Okay, but you can change the parameters. So perhaps you're not interested in turnover, but actually you're interested in how good are the club at managing their wages. You might use a comparison tool like wages to turnover as a ratio. Well, actually, perhaps we're interested in equity value. Okay, so we're interested at how much the club might be potentially worth. Okay. Show data. And we can see how much clubs are valued at. Okay. So feel free to play around with that, and we'll do some exercises with it next week to get you more familiar with it. Okay. Any questions about anything? No? In that case, you are free to go. I will see you next week.